guys, welcome back to GRAZYTV. Do you see this outfit? Like, look at this two-toned dress that I have and my new earrings, the little bow on my head. Yes, I'm magical and I'm proud of it. Today's case is a crazy case about a man who found out his wife was a North Korean spy. She tried to kidnap him to North Korea, but there's so many plot twists to this story. I guarantee you when you're watching this, you're gonna be like, wait, what? Wait, what happened? Wait, what? What we know of this story is not the truth, and this is one of the saddest stories that I've done about a victim who didn't even get fingernail worth of justice, in my opinion. Remember, if you really enjoy these videos, it helps me out to smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell because I reply to all my early birds that come to my videos early. And I just want to give out a huge shout out to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Sponsors help out creators so much, so thank you to Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. You could explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity. And you guys know I've been talking about Skillshare for a long time now, and I'm preparing for the future where I really want to open up my own online shop. So I've been taking the Going Freelance, Building and Branding Your Own Success class. It gives a lot of insight about going freelance, making your own businesses, and becoming your own boss. Especially, there's a lot of downtime now that we're not going out as much anymore, so learning is the best thing to do right now. There's so many classes that you will be interested in, such as astrology, psychology, music and video productions, arts and crafts, web development, illustration, and just so many things that you could just learn on your downtime. Also really affordable. Yearly subscription is less than $10 a month. First 1,000 of my subscribers who click the link down in the description box, you will get a free trial of the premium membership. This is super exciting, so remember to click the link down below. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. This tea is so good. This is taro tea. But anyway, let's talk about the man who found out his wife was a North Korean spy. So we're going to be talking about Mr. Yoon, who was a 28-year-old back then. He went to go live in Hong Kong in 1987 because he was looking for a job. Particularly, he was trying to set up a video selling company. I guess it's like DVDs? No, it's like VHS, I guess, back in 1987. So now that he moved to Hong Kong, he needed to find a new place to live in, and he found this one apartment that he wanted to stay at. So the person that was still living in this apartment was a beautiful woman by the name Suzy. She was 34 years old, and they describe her of having a very beautiful face. She was slim, and she was like ideal for every guy's type. She's been living in Hong Kong for about 10 years now, and she was supposed to move to Japan but claimed that her work got delayed, so she needed to stay in this apartment, and told Yoon, hey, I'm really sorry, my work's been delayed. Do you mind just using the room for now until my work kind of figures out? I'm sure she seemed beautiful to Yoon in the first glance, so why not stay with a beautiful woman in an apartment? He was like, yes, of course. Now this part is really weird, but like just 1 month into meeting each other, they decided to get married. But anyway, Suzy was a really great supporter of Yoon. She even gave Yoon about 50 million yen, which is about $50,000, to start his own video business in Hong Kong. So their relationship was pretty much going well on the surface. Now on January 2nd, 1987, Yoon claims that all of a sudden there was two strange men that came to their apartment that was looking for Suzy. They spoke Japanese, and Yoon claimed that he thought it could be the General Association of Korean Residents in Japan, which are ethnic Koreans living in Japan who says they have close ties to the North Korea. He said that everything just seemed super suspicious. The man looked suspicious, his wife started looking suspicious. Suzy said, hey, could you please get me some cigarettes and some juice? Go out and come back. He just thought, hey, okay, let me just step back for a bit and come back. So when he got the cigarettes and juice and came back, no one was at the apartment. He waited for about a day. Suzy still never came back. The next day, the same men came to the apartment and told Yoon, hey, your wife's been kidnapped. She's in a lot of debt and she owes a lot of money to us. We kidnapped her to Singapore. We're going to be selling your wife, Suzy, so you better come to Singapore and pay the debt back yourself. You're never gonna see her again. Of course, just like any good partner should be, Mr. Yoon decided to fly to Singapore. Right the next day, he booked a flight to Singapore, and when he arrived, there was a woman that claimed to be Suzy's friend, and she took him to a hotel. He was instructed to just wait, and the next day, on the 5th, she handed him a memo with an address. He got in a taxi, went to this random address, and when he got off, he saw that it was the North Korean embassy in Singapore. When he went in, it was hell for Mr. Mr. Yoon. He claims that he was threatened to seek asylum to North Korea, basically forcing someone to say something negative about South Korea, saying, I want to go to North Korea. The North Koreans claim that he used their money, the $50,000 that Suzy gave him, in order to fund his business, so there's no way that he could back out of this. At that moment, he found out that this was all a setup by his wife, Suzy, who turned out to be a North Korean spy. He found out that since the day Suzy met Yoon at the apartment, she used him and pretended to fall in love with him, with the end goal of kidnapping him to North Korea. Mr. Yoon claims that the kidnappers took him to a hotel. When no one was looking, he was able to escape the hotel. He ran to the nearby taxi and he yelled to the taxi driver, take me to the South Korean embassy. So this is how Mr. Yoon says he got out of this whole North Korean spy kidnapping scandal. He somehow still had the passport of his wife Suzy, and it showed that she frequently visited Japan, which supported his story even more that she was a spy and these guys were indeed the General Association of Korean Residents in Japan, who supposedly have a connection with North Koreans. Mr. Yoon was finally able to return to Korea with the help of the embassy, and there was press all over him. He's saying, I'm so scared, I'm glad I'm alive, I can't believe I'm alive, him crying. This was a huge story that just blew up. I mean, think about it. He was a young 28-year-old man that got kidnapped and he saved himself. Like, he literally left and decided to risk his life. People were calling Suzy the honey trap, which certain organizations use beautiful females and seduction in order to spy on men and get what they want. Suzy was named the female spy preying upon her husband, attempted kidnapped North Korean. She was just frowned upon, and of course any of her family that was related to Suzy, people were just going to exile you from their own family. So this is where the story gets really interesting, and this is the first plot twist that we're gonna hear. Actually, about 17 days after Mr. Yoon returned to Korea, a different story was happening in Hong Kong. On January 26th, a neighbor reported to the police about a foul smell coming from their nearby apartment. The police followed the smell, and indeed it was coming from a bedroom. They followed the smell even more, and it was coming from a bed. So the police lifted the bed, and voila, they saw a female dead body. The crazy thing is, this body was found to be Suzy, the North Korean spy. First of all, I thought she ran away to North Korea. Why is her body in the apartment? Suzy had a one-piece dress and a bed sheet that was covering her face, which indicated a suffocation. Now, to everyone at this moment, people might think, oh, because Suzy failed the kidnapping, maybe this was her punishment by the North Koreans. Regardless, Mr. Yoon was still praised for his escape, his anti-communism, that he did not want to stand up for them. So that's where technically the story was supposed to end, or was it? Now 14 years have passed since this whole case, and Mr. Yoon was again praised to be the CEO of a private equity company. He even merged with a famous American company in Silicon Valley, and he just became a really successful businessman. Now somewhere between 2001, there were many rumors that surfaced that Suzy was not a spy, that Mr. Yoon's story technically didn't really make sense, and there wasn't enough evidence to prove that Suzy was a spy. The evidence actually all pointed to more of a cold-blooded murder. The accused murderer was none other than her husband, Mr. Yoon. Because of the suspicions, 2 months before the statute of limitation, which was 15 years, so after 15 years passes, Mr. Yoon, or whoever the criminal was, can't be charged for the crime. So just 2 months before Mr. Yoon was arrested for Suzy's murder, and the truth started to pour out from here. When he was arrested, Mr. Yoon claimed that it was a conspiracy because he is a CEO, people want his money, they're trying to get him. He said the truth will be revealed. But a little while later, he actually confessed to the murder of his wife, Suzy. It was said that in Hong Kong at the time of this murder back in 1987, the Hong Kong police didn't believe Yoon's story and wanted to talk to Yoon, but the South Korean police wasn't willing to give in Mr. Yoon or help the Hong Kong police out at all, which was suspicious. But I mean, what could they do? They already extradited Yoon back to South Korea. The story blew up. There's nothing that they could do. On top of that, there was no social media or internet back then, so any rumor was really hard to be discovered. It was really within the people. So the The whole story of Suzy being a North Korean spy was a made-up story by Mr. Yoon. And the real story goes like this. Suzy's friends in Hong Kong remember her and Yoon fighting very often, and there was a loud noise coming from the apartment the night that Suzy disappeared. Apparently the fight was because Mr. Yoon had spent a lot of money and Suzy got really angry. So they were fighting over money, and when Mr. Yoon couldn't control his anger, that's when he blew something to Suzy's head, knocked her out, and he strangled her to death. He says that when he calmed down, reality sinked in and he knew that he was in big trouble and he had to think what he had to do. It was right then and then he had the idea of pointing his wife, Suzy, as a North Korean spy, because apparently back then there was a law that if you killed like an enemy spy or something, that you could technically be free, like you wouldn't be charged for murder or crimes. The day after murdering his wife, he got the first flight that he found, and it was apparently to Singapore. The actual first plan was to flee to North Korea, so he actually thought that by going to the North Korean embassy that they would take him in because he was willing to just salute to North Korea just to get away with murder. But actually when he got to the embassy, the North Korean embassy guys were like, "Why are you trying to enter North Korea? What's wrong with you? You're weird. Get out." And they just literally kicked him out. So his plan A was scrapped and he decided, okay, let's go with plan B, which is to point my wife as North Korean spy. So next, indeed, he did go to the South Korean embassy claiming that his wife was a North Korean spy. He's been kidnapped and he just said this shenanigans. Now the real shocker does not end here, and here's another plot twist. Now when Mr. Yoon was still in Singapore, the Korean embassy, and he was telling his story, the embassy actually did not believe his story because it obviously seemed like he was making things up. He had no evidence to back his story or anything. So the embassy in Singapore told the South Korean security department in South Korea, hey, there's this guy claiming his weird story. We don't believe this is true. You guys should delay this press conference because this guy's story just seems really foolish. The South Korean department replied saying that the boss of the security department is ordering you, the Singaporean Korean embassy, to just go with the original story. This story is something that will benefit everyone. Tell Yoon to not change his story and we will protect him once he comes to Korea. This is crazy. So technically the South Korean security department, which technically is like kind of like the military, are covering up for Mr. Yoon when they knew that this story was fake. 2 days later, after he did this whole press conference, he was taken to a private location where he was interrogated by the security department. This is when Yoon actually confessed to the murder. He confessed to everything, saying that, yo, I made up this whole story, I was scared, I didn't want to be caught, I actually killed my wife. But apparently the department said, never tell anyone what really happened. Are you kidding me? So why did they do this? Why were they willing to cover up for Mr. Yoon? So back in 1987, South Korean President Chun Doo-won had a huge controversy. There was a lot of riots. The 1987 riot is actually really famous. It's historical in Korea. And they were actually trying to overthrow the current president. They actually found the story, the North Korean spy story, to be a perfect cover-up for any noise that was going within the government. It was to actually quiet the public down, and because the story was already involving North Korea, which was South Koreans' other side opponent, they felt as if there was no problem letting the story run and letting Yoon be the anti-communist hero. So who was this boss of the department that kept on wanting to use Mr. Yoon's story to cover up everything? The boss was named Mr. Chang, who was the right-hand man for the president Chun Doo-won. And they even had a secret code whenever talking about Suzy and Mr. Yoon's case within the security department and the embassies. They say they called Suzy macaroni. So yes, they actually do have these like food secret codes within the governments because obviously they have to keep it a secret and not let anything out to the public. The aftermath of Suzy's family, the victim's family, was horrific, you guys. During the 14 years that Miss Suzy was accused of being a North Korean spy, Suzy's parents and even her second sister's family were taken taken by the military police and threatened them to confess that their daughter was indeed a North Korean spy. Their family, the whole family, was just being brainwashed to think that their daughter was actually a North Korean spy when they weren't. And you might think, well, if it was me, I would never confess. But think about it, the military police are literally threatening you. They are abusing you, telling, yes, your sister is a North Korean spy. Then now you start to think, and your brain is manipulated to actually now think that your family member was a spy when they weren't, when you know they weren't. Suzy's third sister was a newlywed at the time, but after finding out that she was related to Suzy, the in-laws kicked her out, abused her, and forced a divorce. She even had a son with her husband, but after being kicked out, her in-laws kicked the son out and made him grow up in a temple. The in-laws just did not want to have anything to do with North Korean spy story and things like that. They didn't want to ruin their family, so they even abandoned their son. Suzy's mother was threatened. She was abused by the military police, and she later developed aphasia due to extreme stress and ended up passing away. In total, 3 of the sisters in this family were forced to divorce by their in-laws. Their whole family was terrorized by the whole nation and their in-laws, their own family, when at the end, the story just turned out to be a big lie. Mr. Yoon was sentenced only 15 years in jail, and he was sentenced to jail in 2001, so he's technically out now. The authorities behind the whole case who abused their powers were not sentenced, as the statute of limitation has been already passed. Take a moment to think about that. So who was Suzy Kim? Who was this lady that was supposedly a North Korean spy? Suzy's real name is actually Miss KIM OK BOON. I am literally getting tears right now talking about her. Oh my god. Literally getting the tears because I feel so bad. Miss Kim Ok Boon was born from a very poor family with her 7 siblings and graduated only elementary school due to poverty. She worked as a bus lady from age 15 and earned only about 50 cents back then. Obviously, the wages were very low back then, but she would still gather all the money she earned and send it back to her family. Her father passed away at their young age, and their house even ended up burning down, so the family actually had no house to stay at. And this is when Suzy just needed to pick up and become like father of the family. Like, she just needed to take care of her family. She started to work as a waitress at bars and decided to go to Hong Kong, as they said they would give her a lot of money. She ended up marrying her first husband in Hong Kong, but they got divorced. Then she dated another man, it didn't work out, and that's when she met Mr. Yoon. From having a hard life, it seemed as when Mr. Yoon approached her with such gentleness, you know, he was young, he seemed really devoted. I think that's why she just felt maybe head over heels, and they just really wanted to start some kind of life together. Not long after getting to know each other, which was only about 6 months, she was murdered. It was only after the truth was revealed 14 years later in 2001 when her sister, this was a sister where she was exiled by her in-laws, her son was kicked to the temple. She got to visit Suzy, her sister, or Miss Ok Boon's grave in Hong Kong. Her sister is seen crying in the video, and when she sees a grave, just one out of many people, obviously not much respect was gone to this grave or funeral, because when she died, her family wasn't there and they just had to bury her. Her sister says the last wish is that she just wishes Ok Boon, Suzy, Ok Boon would just come running towards her, calling her name out, and would give her a hug. There are just so many victims that suffered, and unfortunately the people who are responsible for this didn't really get the justice that people believe that they deserve. I just wish that this story would move a lot of people, taking accountability of everything that you do. Just one little lie like this could ruin many people for their life. This is one story that I really want you guys to share with your friends and your family. Tweet this story, put it on Instagram, whatever it might be. I feel like a lot of people have to just listen to this story. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell because I reply to all my early birds, and see you guys in my next video.